Jay Gabler with the Currents Rock and Roll Book Club, here with the three co-creators of this new book, Mirror Sound, all about self-recorded music. We've got writer Spencer Tweedy, who's also a musician, has been at the Current with his band Tweedy, with his dad Jeff Tweedy, designer Lawrence Azerrad, and photographer Daniel Topete. Thank you all three for being here with us today.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Good to be here.
So for starters, let's talk about the title of the book. How'd you land on the title, Mirror Sound?
Well, it's pretty simple. In fact, it's so simple, I'm worried it's self-conscious that I might be too straightforward, but the idea is that self-recording is like reflecting yourself back to yourself. It's like an audio mirror for your personality and your creativity, and like kind of building in a musical mirror for yourself. Yeah.
Spencer and I kind of agonized last summer, just going through word lists, trying to beat that title. And it just ended up, sometimes it's best to just go with the straight.
Cool.
Yeah.
So let's talk about how this collaboration came together. So you write in the book that Spencer and Lawrence, you two have known each other for a long time through Lawrence's work on Jeff Tweedy's albums. How did that friendship evolve into a partnership on this book project? And then how did Daniel come into the mix?
The idea started brewing within me many years ago by now. We've been working on this for a pretty long time. Because it was inspired by my own experiences self-recording and just the super empowering experience of realizing that it was possible to make records on my own at home, and that, in high school, that I didn't have to wait to be in a traditional studio or to, have all of these other pieces in place, that it was just possible to like realize sounds that I wanted to make then with whatever was available. So I approached Lawrence about maybe making an artifact based on this community that surrounds self-recording, because it seemed that there was kind of a tight-knit, special little niche of people that do this thing. It's, similar to traditional studio recording, but it's also this kind of uniquely solitary thing, and felt like it had its own culture surrounding it. So Lawrence and I developed the idea from there and figured out what shape it might take and how we might go about telling those stories. And I had been lucky to know Daniel through a couple mutual friends for a few years before that, and knew that felt like his photography would be a great fit, because he's photographed tons of bands and had been in every type of musical environment imaginable, I think, already at that point. So, and I knew that, or I was hoping, and it turned out to be correct, that he would be up for the challenge of trying to make a book that required a bunch of traveling and being in a lot of people's cramped personal spaces. So we all came together through that and ended up creating what Mirror Sound became.
It was actually perfect for me, because every time I do a shoot, I try to start at someone's home. It's always been my favorite way of just, I don't know, there's like a trust that you have right away, right off the bat. And yeah, so this was like the perfect opportunity for that.
The word that trust that Daniel uses, your trust, is kind of a perfect fulcrum for where the relationship with Spencer and I started, because doing artwork for and working in the kind of just general Wilco ecosystem, and working with Spencer's dad for so long, that's where I really first got to meet Spencer and started having a dialogue on making art and learning to trust each other. And that's where kind of a collegial bond formed, where it was just like, hey, we really do like talking about ideas of making and creative spirit, and so it just kind of unraveled naturally from there, unraveled in a good way from there, and then Spencer introduced me to Daniel.
Spencer, you used the word artifact. How did you decide that this would be a book as opposed to, a video series, a podcast, any other number of forms this kind of investigation and celebration of this community could have taken?
I wish that there was a high-minded answer to that, but I think the simple answer is just that we love books. And Lawrence is the author of another book called Supersonic about the Concorde jet and everything that entailed, its relation to design and technology and things like that. So I think books are just a really they're still really valuable. They're still really I think they still have a lot of power to embody something and embody, like, they're a great medium for photographs, and Daniel's photos look so unbelievably great in this book. I will gush about them for a million years, but or as much as I can. But books they're just super cool is what it boils down to. And for a first time author like myself, the experience of getting to make a physical book and see these things in print is really cool.
It provides a level of tangency that you really can't get on a blog or certainly not a podcast. You're lucky to be speaking to us on the week that we actually got our physical books. Daniel, was it yesterday that we met up and just to see for the first time the scale, holding it in your hands is completely a different experience than, especially when we're so used to watching everything on our iPhone. You appreciate it, connect to it, and come back to it in a different way. Maybe you want to add, Daniel, what that was like to kind of the difference.
It was a complete shock to me, honestly. There were some photos that I took that I didn't even realize I liked until I saw them in print. Like, there was some that Lawrence chose and it wasn't my favorite photo. And then once I saw it in print, like, I saw the grandness of it. I don't know. So he did a great job on that.
Yeah.
I mean, you have a different relationship to something in the physical. Same as with music. You're listening to a record on a streaming service. It's so much easier to hit next or to kind of bop around from record to record, track to track. When you put on an album, on an LP, that's much more kind of like a singular, almost like kind of, to use the word, meditative experience. So like when we were laying out the book, I actually had to print out every single photo from every single part of every session. 800 thousands really of little pieces of paper, and just to be able to kind of have like a physical relationship to all of these things. So when you hold it, you read it, it's different than glancing at an interview with, say, Segall on the subway. It's a different kind of listening and learning and understanding.
So to bring people up to speed, if anyone is watching and is not familiar with the book, so you visited a wide range of artists, from the legendary Suzanne Ciani to our bands like Tune Yards, to there's Vagabon on the cover, Jay Som, all these artists. And these are artists who are known for our part of this community where they record in their homes. And you used the word trust a little bit earlier. Are a lot of these artists maybe letting another observer, photographer or writer, designer into their space for the first time, or is it rare for them?
Definitely. I don't know what portion of the artists for whom it was the first time that they let someone into their personal spaces, but I can say that with every artist that we talked to and that we photographed, it was every single time it felt like, whoa, this is really a privilege that they're allowing us to be in here. It felt in a lot of cases like even more generous and more giving than I would be willing to be with my personal space and like with my bedroom creative workspace. So we really appreciated it. Daniel, did you have anything to add on that?
Emitt Rhodes we were the first people in his studio in 20 years. Even himself, I believe, hadn't been in there. But every place felt very special and privileged, like Spencer said, to be there.
I'm going to embarrass Daniel, though, because the good photography is more than just lighting and composition, but Daniel had this kind of like supernatural ability to capture these moments where people seem really kind of honest and pure. It's almost like that trust is manifested in the photos. open and honest kind of fly through these places and souls.
Yeah.
Well, and certainly the timing of the book's publication is poignant, given that we are now in a few months into lockdown due to the public health crisis, and we're seeing a lot of people's personal spaces in ways that we hadn't been before. I'm here in my kitchen, you know, you're all in your homes and personal spaces, but I gather the work on the book happened entirely or almost entirely before we went into lockdown. So how are you, what's it like to be bringing this work out now before the public in the current environment?
It's true. We did finish producing the book before any of this happened. So it's a coincidence, and not one that we feel very comfortable celebrating, obviously, because nothing about the way things are going right now is worth celebrating. But it does seem to relate to the idea that like your creativity is more resilient when you don't have to rely on a whole bunch of like a whole other apparatus and a whole other place to go or too many collaborators and tools you need. Like when you can make the records you want to make at home or with whatever is available to you, you can kind of keep on going, and that can be a really healthy way to cope, I think, for a lot of people throughout everything that's going on.
Yeah, the idea that you can spark creativity within yourself wherever you are, and sometimes impose your own challenges to make creativity flourish, and that also is still being able to be creative under the challenges of a quarantine like this.
Yeah.
You just have to face challenges in whichever way they unfold. And a lot of the book is about being creative in the face of that.
I suppose everybody's forced to be creative in that way now, but this is, you know, celebrating artists who have largely chosen to inhabit their own spaces and work independently. You wrote, Spencer, about setting up your own setup underneath the basement stairs. And I'm curious to know, what do you see as the sort of connective tissue across all of these artists from different generations, different genres? What is it that these artists have in common that has caused them all to, you know, look inward into their own spaces, create their own creative areas to make their art in?
I think the number one most common thread between them is a desire to have the comfort of recording in their own space. Even if you love a particular traditional studio and you have a great relationship with the engineers there can still be a feeling that you're on the clock and paying for every minute of time. And for some people, that can be a big impediment to feeling willing to explore, because sometimes it can take just a ton of time and a ton of raw effort to arrive at a sound that is the sound that unlocks a particular song or a particular arrangement. And so it can be really important to not have any worry whatsoever that you have to make the most of the most of the hour, or that there's somebody, you know, looking through the control room glass and waiting for you to do the real take or whatever it is. So I think the common thread is that people, the artists in this book, enjoy having none of that concern at all and being allowed to waste time. It's not really wasted time, obviously, but being allowed to record 400 hours before they get the 3 minutes that feel right, or whatever workflow works for them.
I suppose it may be a cliche to say that the studio is an instrument, or that some artists use the studio as an instrument, but certainly all the artists here, and to some extent probably every recording artist, the studio, whatever studio environment you're in, whether it's professional studio, it's your own setup, what have you, it's really part of what gets created is the space you're in and the equipment you're using. And it seems that the book argues that whatever limitations there may be technically to working in your own space, for these artists at least, what they're able to accomplish in terms of controlling their environment, controlling their sound, controlling their space, more than makes up for any technical limitations they might face.
I think that's definitely true. And that's one of the things that Lawrence brought to the project early on, was an awareness that not only the environment within the studio, but the environment around somebody's workspace can have super profound effects on what they end up creating, even if it's really hard for them to articulate how that happened or what the influence of the environment is. it's subliminal, but it ends up, I think, playing out in, I think it absolutely ends up having an influence on their finished products.
Yeah, it primes an intention. So even though you are perhaps recording in your bedroom, there is this kind of like goal from within. Just I don't care if I'm doing this on my iPhone or my laptop. I'm still gonna make it excellent. Or perhaps some of the artists that Spencer and Daniel visited were in upstate New York in kind of beautiful woods, and just so. Or some in like super urban environments, the environments that we create, and somehow through like a form of osmosis, definitely inform, pervade, influence, leave a thumbprint of how we create and why we create.
Well, and clearly visuals are very important to that as well. Music is music by definition. It's audio, but for these artists, the visual space they inhabit is important. You write in the book about why it was important to bring that element to show these artists spaces, because this is what they're looking at when they're creating. And obviously this is something you've long reflected on, Lawrence, in your work, working on albums and thinking about what visuals are going to accompany this music.
Yeah, it's the things that you surround yourself with are definitely kind of form your creative spirit, and how you kind of dress, or how you kind of walk into the place where you make your stuff, affects your intention and attention to your process. So like I think of, Bob Bruno, who is in Best Coast amongst a bunch of other projects. He has a lot of these like super awesome but niche Japanese like wrestling poster, like just lots of like super cool elements of his kind of creative DNA that may not have a sonic signature in his music, but somehow it forms who he is as a person, and that is a formative element in creating the music. And I think that's true with all of the artists. Like Suzanne Ciani is up like way on these cliffs above the ocean, and it's not just the proximity to the ocean, but the type of town that she's in and her proximity to nature. All of these aspects affect who we are as an artist in a more holistic kind of 360 kind of degree way. And Daniel did a super job of capturing all of those ingredients.
So Daniel and Spencer, what were some of your favorite moments that you had going and visiting all these artists and spending time in their spaces?
I think we're it's still reeling from getting to meet Emitt Rhodes, getting to see his studio and his garage in California, because Emitt has created some of the most important records to me and most important records to a lot of people with his solo records from the late 60s and the early 70s. And the fact that he was willing to let us into that space was shocking and just really, really cool. And his studio he had built to his like dream specs in the early 70s when he moved across the street from his parents' house, where his first garage studio was right before that. So there's shag carpet on the floor and the walls, and I think even on the ceiling in some parts. He just talked to us about hanging the monitors from the ceiling himself and how he built it all. And yeah, there's just getting to meet the person behind music that you love is always a really exciting experience. Do you have any thing to add, Daniel?
I was just thinking of Sam Evian. His space was really a reflection of himself and the music that he makes there. It was like this beautiful home in upstate New York, and I think he invited us to stay there. I don't know. It made perfect sense that he made music there.
Yeah.
Everyone was so lovely though.
There must have been some significant technical challenges that you faced, Daniel, as a photographer, because these are intimate, sort of low light spaces. These aren't photography studios, and you're not going to be bringing in a lot of artificial light or anything either.
No, not too much. Sadie from Speedy Ortiz was in a basement, and it was lit with Christmas lights, basically, like blue Christmas lights. And it was so beautiful. Like it was really cool, but it was very hard to photograph. But I didn't want to bring in my own lighting or anything. So I had to shoot digital for that whole thing. And I just had to capture her space. instead of like bringing in my own artificial light.
That session ends up being one of my favorites from the whole book, because there is this like kind of blue glow to everything, and you're like almost like in kind of like this aquarium kind of vibe, like underwater feeling. And
I didn't want to take away from that at all. And then there's some spaces where there was just so much stuff, like a hard flash to show the craziness of it. Like Jonathan Rado's space, I think, was one that comes to mind.
Yeah.
Just had a billion wires running up every single wall you could possibly think of.
I wonder, are there any songs that any of you hear differently now that you've seen, experienced, talked to the artists about the spaces where the songs were recorded?
I feel like I have a little bit more insight now into the way Ty Segall composes some of his stuff, because he talked about using improvisation to compose and picking an instrument to start with and then building things based off of a 2 or 3 minute improvisation that he did on that instrument. So that was enlightening. But as far as a specific song, I think Superbike by Jay Som, I hear in a little bit of a different way, because Melina of Jay Som talked to us about needing to escape her home in LA because the roommates and neighbors were just too distracting and encroaching on her microphones in her bedroom. So she rented an Airbnb in Joshua Tree and moved all of her equipment there for a weekend or a week or something, and recorded the album that Superbike came from. So I think when I listen to that song now, I think about what she described as that trip there, and ironically then inviting her friends out to that Airbnb studio too, because she ended up missing them, and she wanted, she enjoys them even if they're too loud for recording sometimes.
I think seeing the relationship between Meryl and Nate in Tune Yards is really nice. There's some great pictures that I didn't necessarily know that they were a couple married, and that they work together, but you also see in some of the photos like expressions where they're looking at each other, and collaboration manifests not just in music too. It just you can see it in their eyes, and you hear it in the music.
So obviously there are infinite different spaces that one could visit for a project like this, and makes me think of what my bucket list is of spaces or studios to visit. I think of, boy, if you get into the room where Bruce Springsteen recorded Nebraska, do you have any spaces on your bucket list of places you'd still love to see or visit sometime, in terms of places where music is made and recorded?
Definitely. I really admire, as far as contemporary artists, I really admire Kevin Parker. I think that, he's reached this stratosphere of pop music, which is really cool. And indie musicians, indie rock world musicians ought not to reject him just because he's had this like crossover success, in my opinion, at least. But I really admire him for his production of records like Melody's Echo Chamber, and his own records as Tame Impala. So I think it would be amazing to get to talk to him someday, or to see I think he's had a couple of different studios by now and different rented houses and things like that. But to see where he makes records would be really exciting. But the holy grail for me would have to be going back in time and being in the room where Paul McCartney was recording his first solo records, McCartney 1 and 2. And while I'm in the time machine, I might as well also go to where he was recording Ram. I don't think that record Ram was necessarily self-engineered, but all of those records are some of the most inspiring to me, and definitely inspired me to start engineering as well. So those would be my picks.
You say bucket list, Jay, but Bruce Springsteen, Nebraska was literally on our list for this record. So if there's any chance that the boss might be listening to this show, I'm sure we could arrange Mirror Sound 2 or Mirror Sound Nebraska. We could just do that book and make that happen. And that would be a really great book, Bruce. Yeah. So there's that.
Daniel, I'm sure you have some wish list items too.
Bruce Springsteen, Nebraska is definitely on the list. There's a Blaze Foley album I really love, and and he recorded on a 4-track, 8-track, I forget what. I think just a tape deck on a kitchen table would be my time travel wish list.
Oh, I've got one more to add. It would be Robert Pollard of Guided by Voices, who has recorded approximately 4,000 albums on his own, or in, with various incarnations of Guided by Voices. And we did reach out to him for Mirror Sound, but I think he was too busy making more music, so we weren't able to do that. But maybe someday we could.
Yeah, I think it'd be impossible to have Guided by Voices career if you've got to book the Hit Factory every time.
Yeah, exactly.
Well, thanks all three of you for coming together and talking about this extraordinary new book. It was so great to take a look at it. Glad it is out there in the world and available for people to order or pick up at their local bookstore now.
Thank you so much, Jay. Thank you.
Yeah.
Thanks, Jay.
Thank you, Jamie.
Thanks.